Welcome to Sherlock Mondays. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we are wrapping up our biblioventure through the stories of Sherlock Holmes. This is episode 30, The Observation of Trifles, I've called it, in which we talk about our experience of reading the first 27 Sherlock Holmes stories. And we're also going to answer some questions today from you guys. I hope you have some questions to ask us and you'll put them in the chat and we'll do that. So, and to do so, we have three of our Sherlockian co-hosts on board. Hi, Monica Schmidt.
Hey, Ed.
Hi, Anastasia Klimchynskaya.
Cheers.
And hey, Mary Alcaro.
Hello.
I'm so happy to have you all on. I'm sorry Curtis couldn't be here for this episode. We won't. People who have signed up for Hound will get another shot of Curtis. He'll be on one of those episodes, one of the Hound of the Baskervilles. For 29 episodes, we have deduced, deciphered, and dissected Arthur Conan Doyle stories about the world's first consulting detective, Sherlock Holmes, and his able assistant, Dr. John Watson, in a kind of conversational annotation. And now we'll have a party about it because we all have drinks. I have cocktail franks because, you know, it's a party.
You gotta have some snacks,
little
right?
Fiesta bites.
Love it.
So it had Fiesta on it. So there you go.
Definitely, it's official.
But I would still also ask our audience, I would ask you all to please consider making a donation to the Rosenbach. All of you who have donated or joined as members already, thank you so much. We are able to make these shows for free to watch because of your support of the Rosenbach. Sherlock Mondays also had a generous patron in Lisa Washington. She also sponsored Austin Mondays, which was really great. So I am so grateful to Lisa Washington for all her support of our programs at the Rosenbach. But we do rely heavily on support from our audience too. So if you have not already donated or become a member, I still invite you to do so. Your support helps us not only create these shows, but also care for our collections, including Conan Doyle's manuscript for The Empty House, which we have. And there will also be, everyone, I know you're all ready for this, a very special announcement that I'll do like kind of midway through the show. So you don't want to miss the special announcement. There you go. Always keep them waiting. So I'm not the worst. I don't keep everybody waiting till the end, but
that's fair.
The middle
Yeah.
is, if you stuck around in the middle, why aren't you sticking around to the end? So, but because it's a party and because Mary Alcaro is here especially, what are we drinking tonight? What are you drinking tonight, Mary?
Tonight, to come full circle, I am drinking our first drink of the series, which is the Scarlet Skein, which is gin, Aperol, cranberry cocktail, and lemon to taste.
Nice. That's a good drink.
I enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed all the drinks, and we're definitely
So
want to talk about your Sherlock tales in the show tonight. So, Monica?
Champagne for my real friends, real pain for my sham friends. So I'm rocking some champagne tonight out of celebration for 30 weeks of really amazing video podcasting with my friends. So it's right to celebrate tonight.
And like what you told me earlier, the end of the Empty House episode of the Granada.
Exactly.
Yeah. Champagne.
Exactly.
Anastasia, what are you drinking?
I am drinking some nice warm non-alcoholic tea. I'm sorry, it's not very festive.
But not by choice.
Well, I climbed out of a prehistoric cave today and decided some tea was in order.
There you go. So, well, I decided to let everybody choose what they would like to drink for this episode. So if you have a special cocktail out there and want to let us know what it is, please put it into the chat. Maybe it's one of the Sherlock tales that we had during the series. I'd love to hear that. So Kristen's drinking red wine. So, and she also asked what everybody's drinking. So We're also nosy about what we're drinking. So,
Of course.
Why not?
We're in detective mode. We need to know.
all righty. Well, I am drinking. I went through the whole list, Mary, of all your drinks. I'm like, which do I have? Which do I really love? And like, I love a few. And then I decided I did come up kind of with my own, but
Oh,
it is well, it's a martini. Um, and that's gin, everybody, because martini
a
means
proper martini. Yes.
Yes, proper martini versus the James Bond bastardization.
and I put some mint in it, some fresh mint from outside from our garden.
Lovely.
And thought that would be a nice little taste to it. But what makes it special is that I combine gins, and it is Plymouth gin, which is the oldest gin
Very
distillery,
dry. Yes.
and Blue Coat gin, which
Oh,
is
a
still
local gin.
so I thought the English gin, the Philadelphia gin, that would be perfect for Sherlock Mondays.
That is perfect.
I like this, the nice melding together of cultures and gins.
And it's nice with the mint. It's a usually I'm a olive martini guy, and so
Yeah.
it's nice to have a little change there with but not to go too crazy with the change. So, all righty. Well, again, we want to hear from you guys today too. So if you have questions about Sherlock in general, about the stories, about the show, anything about the show and how we put it together and done anything, please put your questions in the live chat. I'm happy to answer them today. Usually during the shows, we don't get to interact that much with the crowd because we have to run the show and talk about the story. And, we hit a question here and there, but we don't get to do a lot of them. But feel like you can ask anything you want about the show or Sherlock tonight, and we'll do our best to answer them. And the thing I like to keep in mind tonight, guys, is what I mentioned to you that we have created over 50 hours of Sherlockian content, 50 hours and 39 minutes. So after the last episode, so
And
this one will add to that. And over 7 months. So those of you who have watched the show from the beginning and watched all the episodes, especially those of you, and I know there are some of you who have watched it all completely live every week. Thank you, and I hope this was a worthwhile biblio-venture for you, as worthwhile as it's been for me. General impressions, guys, about how you've how this has affected your Sherlockian life. Who do you want to start? Monica, I want to start with you.
Sure. I mean, what's kind of interesting, and this is my first time on a video podcast. I mean, and I within the context of the Sherlockian community, I'm definitely one of the extroverts among the introverted folk. And I'm a border collie, and which means that I'm good at herding people and bringing people together. But so this is kind of a new experience for me doing the video podcast, but also interacting with people who are seeing me as like a knowledgeable Sherlockian. It's been a little surreal just because, even though I've been part of this community for 14 years, really heavily involved in this community for the last decade, and BSI for the last 5, I still kind of conceptualize myself as one of the newbies, looking to the old guard. And so it's been a bit of a mind twist for me to have people looking to me as an expert on Sherlock Holmes, whereas I just think of myself as an extraordinarily knowledgeable nerd. But I've received some notes from a couple of people, actually fan letters, which is or either fan Facebook messages, which is lovely, or fan emails for people who have decided to find my professional email address. And I even got, because of this podcast, I even got to do a lecture for a major university in Washington, D.C., because they saw me on the podcast and they wanted me to talk about my engagement with the Sherlock Holmes stories and mental health, because it fit with the theme of the class. And so this has just been kind of a really cool journey of working towards accepting the fact that I'm now, for better or for worse, kind of solidified within the Sherlockian community as somebody versus a newbie. And so I'll take ownership of the fact that it's like I don't see myself in that context, but apparently I'm in that context, and so now I've got to deal with it.
I would absolutely echo what Monica said. I think our first BSI weekend for the both of us was maybe the same weekend or one weekend removed. So sometimes Facebook still like
I did
pops up in my
2014.
memories,
Yeah.
and shows me photos of the two of us at our first BSI weekend. And God, we look so young.
Oh God,
But it's been so wonderful for me because when I attend Sherlockian events, I always have someone come up to me and say, you know, I've been watching you on that Rosenbach show and you've been doing a wonderful job. And
yeah.
usually this is a Sherlockian who has been in the community for a while, who has been a staple at these events, whether in New York or a local science society. And it's been so exciting that we're bringing new people into Sherlock Holmes, but also people who have been reading and rereading these stories for decades, and who are so well versed in them are also watching this and apparently finding new things to discover. I love that we've managed to attract both audiences. And I myself, when I watch you guys, the other co-hosts on the shows that I'm not on, I learned so much too. You know, I don't think none of us know everything there is to know. And it's been so wonderful to learn from all of my lovely co-hosts.
Oh yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, I've learned more from you guys than I could possibly know. And that's what I love about this is that even though it's the finite canon, the finite quantity of stories, we each have our own unique perspectives and takes on it, and there's plenty of room for continued, education, continued learning, and that this is why I love this show, and love having been part of this show is because I've learned and I've grown as a Sherlockian by essentially being forced to do these deep dives, which is great, but it's like
forced at knife
forced,
point, Monica. You would never read
forced.
them otherwise.
Twist my arm, why don't
Maybe
you?
I should rephrase that. I think I forced my husband to listen to the audiobooks on repeat on Sundays as I'm prepping for my various episodes. So my poor husband was forced. I engaged lovingly and willingly, but
My partner's learned more about Sherlock Holmes than he ever expected to know.
Yeah.
I do. How about you, Mary?
This has been such a delight for me. And obviously, to echo what my two lovely co-hosts have said, I want to return to something, Anastasia, that you had said about bringing in new people. One of my favorite things about this show has been reading the comments of people who are reading these stories for the first time. And watching people come to these stories. I think this is the teacher in me. People who are coming to the stories with their questions. Weeks ago, I saw somebody post a question about chronology and saying something about continuity and something about,
boy.
I thought thought Watson was married. Now they're living together. I'm not sure what's going on here. And I just laughed in joy because I was like, yes.
That person has an entire world opening up to them.
It's an entire world.
I don't know if they want to be part of that world, but they're in for a ride.
It's incredible,
we
right?
should be part of this world.
For us, right, it's like this is such an old problem, and we talk about this at length, and it has been the subject of monographs, trifling, and deep in your cups arguments, rise and fall, friendship ruiners, not really, but playfully, the chronology, and to see someone see this with fresh eyes, I think is the best.
Yeah.
I agree.
Learn something from people who are seeing something for the first time, and that goes for a lot of the questions that we've gotten both in the Facebook group and in the chat, and it's just been so delightful for me because this has been a lovely bridge between worlds for me. In my day job, I am a medievalist. I work on medieval literature. I never get to do this sort of deep dive into Sherlock, except when I'm hanging out with my friends. And Sherlockiana is like my secret life. And this has been a wonderful opportunity
I
for
thought
me
you were about to
to
say medievalists don't do fun shows like this.
oh, we do all kinds of fun stuff. Kalamazoo's coming up next month, and what happens in Kalamazoo stays in Kalamazoo.
Oh, so I
We
hear. I have a number of
connect with-
medievalist friends, yeah, their work seems quite fun.
Great.
Oh yeah. Well, if you're going to
Although
Kalamazoo,
at
you
times
definitely need to connect
exhausting
with
because
Madeline.
they like
That's-
to take issue with us 19th century lovers when we're like, this was first done in this 19th century novel, and they always like to go, well, actually. So it
Medievalists
must
are the
be
ultimate.
tiring.
Well,
Exactly.
actually, no, but it's just been fantastic to sort of bridge the sort of the fun hobbyist stuff with the sort of academic and to make it accessible.
Yeah, and that
Oh, very much
balance
so.
that you both talked about, that the new people to the canon, like Janine, who just said in the chat that she's one of the new people, and the people who have watched this, and even like experts who I mean, some of the Hound co-hosts are often in the chat, so
Yeah.
and special guests we've had are in the chat as well. So to be able to do a show that it's for everybody is really nice. We had a great recommendation here for a drink, a non-alcoholic drink from Bob P. And he says a variation on the Shirley Temple, and call it the Sherlock Temple. There you go.
Ooh.
So you can come up with that one.
And there are a couple of references to temple and inner temple in the Sherlock Holmes reference or the Sherlock Holmes stories. Just because I know that let's see, Ross Davies is the temple, as far as his investiture, and then there's Peter Horrocks in England, who is the inner temple. And so, because investiture names, I know like the ridiculously absurd references. So
Of the BSI,
it is
yeah.
Sherlock Temple totally works.
There you
Brilliant.
go. Someone also asked about Sherlock Mondays merchandise, which I have, said all along we would get going. Now, the key with the Sherlock, that's not the announcement today, everybody. The key with Sherlock Mondays merchandise
I was really hoping.
is that we've been moving at the Rosenbach to opening up a shop within the Rosenbach. And so all the energy has kind of gone into that. So to add a separate stream of merchandise just kind of couldn't be put together just now. But what I will do is when we come up with things, then I will certainly send emails out to everyone registered, and it'll be announced in different ways so people can do some Sherlock merchandise when we're able to finally try to solve that.
I'm glad someone asked so I didn't have to. That would have been awful.
Madeline Q, who we all know, asked, and I'm going to answer this briefly, and then we'll touch on it. If you were doing the whole canon, what's a story beyond Empty House that you would love to tackle? Hound of the Baskervilles. And we're doing that next for the Pay Only series show. But yeah, let's throw that around. What's your favorite story that we haven't covered in these first 27?
I would want to do the Blanche Soldier. Everyone knows I was going to say that. But 100%, I think it is one of the most underrated stories in the canon. It's one of the few in the case book that I think is really a gem. It's one of the few that's narrated by Holmes and not Watson. It is phenomenally queer with a pretty happy ending for its time. I mean, I make arguments all the time about subtextual queerness in the Blanche Soldier. Obviously, there's nothing endorsed by the Conan Doyle estate or Conan Doyle himself, but
and it's towards the end. It's 1926. It's like the fifth last story. So usually people say like, oh, the last stories aren't that good, and that's not true.
Some of them aren't. I mean, but actually did you actually refresh my memory, Mary? Did you contribute to the BSI manuscript series book for Blanche Soldier?
I have contributed to it.
We are table of contents buddies.
Yoo-hoo! Oh, I can't wait to read.
When does that come out?
That comes out in January of next year, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah, so Ira Matetsky, bless Ira, my BSI classmate, Ira. I love Ira.
Such
I
a
love
good
all my
actor.
BSI classmates, but Ira's just extra awesome. But yeah, Ira is editing the BSI press, and I am selling the BSI press manuscript series book. But it will be on the Blanche Soldier. It will be coming out in January of this next year. It's called That Ghastly Face. I did an analysis, basically a differential diagnostic analysis, looking at what could have been, and not quite spoilers here, but basically what could have been the mental health condition that Godfrey Emsworth was dealing with in addition to his physical condition.
Oh, this is going to dovetail very nicely with my piece
Oh,
on
good.
what does Emsworth suffer from physically, the
Oh,
diagnosis
no,
that
All
we
that's
right,
get.
don't give
okay.
any, don't go into the story too much
No,
here.
no, but yeah,
We're
we'll
just
just say
plugging,
this
Ed.
is this is so
We know
important.
how much our audience loves us and wants to hear from us.
And it's a late story,
It's a
so
late story.
Oh
I mean,
yes,
my
it's
recommendation
a
was
late
you go
story.
to the next story, like stay the chronological order and keep reading that way. I'm
Chronology.
such a chrono.
It's a
No, no, no.
late
It's
story.
publishing chronology.
Which chronological order,
Publishing
Ed?
chronology is what
Well,
I
publishing, yeah,
so.
publishing order.
I mean,
All
I
right, I've
will
already
say
tooted the.
oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I think so many of the later stories are actually quite good. I know the adventures and the memoirs are considered like the classics, and
Mhm.
they're what made Doyle famous. But I think there's some, not so good stories in there, and I think there's some very, very good later stories. But
Mhm.
for some reason, people don't like to admit that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good ones. I mean, there genuinely is. I mean, in the last section, the illustrious client, and in my opinion, the illustrious client happens to have. I mean, and I'm going to echo lovely Steve Doyle here, but
Hi,
has
Steve. Because
well, wherever
I know
Steve
he's
is, hi
watching.
Steve.
So hi, Steve.
But we'll just say, the illustrious client happens to have the most modern villain in the canon, and actually, in all honesty, probably the scariest villain in the canon, like a genuinely narcissistic psychopath. And so I will just say that's part of the last grouping of stories. So there are some really decent stories that are in the back end, but yeah, you're right. A lot of people don't want to admit it.
Yeah. Well, I
Copyright's
will
also an
say,
issue, right? That as of this year, everything is now in the copyright.
Oh,
Everything's
actually,
now
Now
in
in
the
I thought it
copy.
was 2023. It
Yeah,
was copyright.
right.
yeah.
What year?
Yeah.
I'm like, what year is
Conan
this?
Doyle estate can no longer sue people. Well, they probably will find a way, but
I'm
Well,
sure they
I think the reason why we'll just say the illustrious client book, That Ghastly Face, came out this past January is because of the previous January being relinquished or into public domain.
Right. So a lot of these stories haven't circulated as widely
Mhm.
as the first ones have, just for the
Yeah.
pure and simple reason that you have to pay someone to print them, and you can't just do like a, Barnes and Noble bargain bin run and sell a sort of $5 Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
now that possibility is open.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good point, actually. Maybe
Mhm.
now some of the later stories will get
The due
some
that they
more
deserve.
yeah.
attention.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my favorite later stories are um, The Devil's Foot and also The Sussex Vampire, because without spoiling, they both kind of tackle this question of there's this apparently supernatural thing that's happening. Is it actually supernatural, or can it be explained with
Mm.
science and rationality? Which is also the question posed by the Hound of the
Well, and
Baskervilles.
that could be the same thing for Doyle, which it is the same thing for
Yeah.
Doyle. So
Mhm.
you can explain scientifically things of the supernatural, which was his whole endeavor. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the Holmes stories, it's always, the world is big enough for us. No ghosts need apply, which he says in the Sussex
yeah.
Vampire. So it's so interesting to me that I think most people know the Hound of the Baskervilles as Holmes's big confrontation with, like, does the supernatural exist? But there's multiple later stories where he also engaged with that question, and with this question of in The Devil's Foot, there's this family found dead, sitting still with like horror on their faces, and there's this question of like, did the devil actually come? Like, was it some magical thing, or is there a scientific explanation? And maybe it's the science fiction fan in me, because this is also a trope that happens a lot in science fiction, in like Star Trek and Stargate, where they go to some planet and they encounter some like supernatural doohickey, and then it turns out that it's actually like a technological scientific doohickey. So it's
Yeah.
so interesting to me that on those stories later in Doyle's life, where he especially got into spiritualism,
Yeah.
he was writing those stories about Sherlock Holmes confronting the supernatural and trying to see, is there a rational explanation, or are there vampires? Like, is there a rational explanation, or did the devil come to Earth? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just pulled up the list of stories in The Return, and I always forget that some of these that I consider like
Yeah.
foundational ones,
Yeah.
right?
Are
Are
in
in
The
The
Return.
Return. We almost didn't get them.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's what I was about to say is that like, some of the greatest ones, Charles Augustus Milverton, which,
Yeah.
had
Yep.
also a dastardly villain, is in there. Black Peter, for crying out
The
loud.
Dancing Men is in there. I think that was one of
Dancing
Doyle's
Men.
favorites too.
Oh yeah, I mean, and The Adventure of the Second Stain, which is one of Doyle's favorites. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of my favorites, in part because the Granada series, the Jeremy Brett series,
Yes.
if the adaptation of that one is spot on. Like, I could sit there with my book and basically read along while watching the episode, and it's so perfect. And that's what I love about it, is that it is one of the few like perfect or nearly perfect adaptations of a Sherlock Holmes story, and that doesn't exist in this like in cinema or television, of a nearly perfect adaptation. So I love that. But so yeah, I would do Charles Augustus Milverton.
Yeah.
I
That's a
would
great one.
do The Second Stain. I would love to do Black Peter, but that probably needs to go to Peter Blau.
Yeah.
If we ever did
The
that.
OG Black Peter.
Exactly, because his BSI investiture is Black Peter for reasons.
I'm looking at The Solitary Cyclist right now,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
The
think
Solitary
about
Cyclist is fantastic.
The Solitary Cyclist is one of these stories that I just think is so unbelievably modern. Like,
Oh,
it's
very
so,
much so.
you could take that story and run this very same plot line like exactly today. A young independent working woman on her bicycle being followed by a creepy dude.
Exactly. And
Timeless.
I mean, it's perfect. I would
Unfortunately, timeless.
Unfortunately timeless.
I mean, and then of course The Dying Detective, which is one of the early stories that I read, like I think in sixth grade.
Yeah.
Me too. Wait, Monica, did you read it as, I had it in a textbook, and it was as the play?
Yes, 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 and more yes. So yeah, you just got it a few years after me.
Nice.
I was in Catholic school. We had old textbooks.
But yeah, I mean, that one has a special place in my heart, because it's like one of the stories that I read about the time that I started reading the canon, but I read it out of context. But it was just wonderful and lovely. And so yeah, I mean, these are great. Plus, I mean, my gosh, Creeping Man, has a lot of fodder for like, mental health engagement. It's I mean, The Three Daredevils is always a classic. The Illustrious Client is one of my favorites.
There are a lot. I mean,
There's a
the
lot.
ones
I
that
mean,
we've
it's
mentioned,
so
I really
awesome.
love. People want to go to
Yeah.
them. There's a question
Yeah.
from Michael R. and he says, why not complete the canon?
Why not?
Well, the way that
Why not?
the BiblioVentures shows operate is that I need to keep choosing things from our collections that can bring us in more audience, new audience. And and we wouldn't want to monopolize the weekly BiblioVenture series with Sherlock Holmes stories for 60 weeks, right? Because there's 56
Long time.
and so we need to have other things come in. That's why we're doing in the fall, we're doing Jekyll and Hyde and A Christmas Carol. So as much as I would love to do continue the Sherlock Weekly, there are other things that we will need to hit as well. We have a lovely comment from Beverly. that
Yeah.
says, my heartfelt thanks to each of you. I am an 87-year-old fan, enthralled by each of you. And Curtis too, I'm sure. Pleased to still be learning and loving. So thank you, Beverly.
Cheers to
Education
Beverly.
never ends, Watson.
Cheers.
Yes. I
Cheers
was
to
just going to
Beverly.
say, cheers to
Right.
Beverly.
Cheers.
The game is always afoot, right?
Yes.
They somebody, well, quickly, and we probably answered this already, but like, let's just go around and like, just in a sentence or two, do you have a favorite? Joyce asked this question. Do you have a favorite adventure, even of the ones that we've covered? All like this, or that you might not have been on the show. Do you have a favorite story? Anastasia, do you have a favorite?
Of all of them.
All the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And you...
So funny you should ask. It's my turn to plug a book I've been in. No, I'm kidding. But there was this anthology called About 60 a few years ago where each Sherlockian wrote about which story they thought was the best, and the subtitle was, why every Sherlock Holmes story is the best. I'm pretty sure Monica was in it too, but I forget which
did
one.
the carbuncle.
Yeah, so I wrote about the Hound of the Baskervilles. I'm sorry that's like such a, obvious choice. Like,
right.
Yeah, my favorite Sherlock Holmes story is the most famous one that everybody's heard of and everybody loves. But if I do say so myself, I think I wrote a good defense of why it is interesting. It goes back to that same idea I was talking about with the Devil's Foot and the Sussex Vampire, that question of, is it supernatural or is there a rational explanation? Obviously, I think for the Victorian period and with their belief in progress and positivism and science, Sherlock Holmes is such an important character. And I'll say this again on the Baskerville show, but he was such an important character who symbolized the knowability of the world. So the Hound of the Baskervilles is a story in which a character comes in, like this symbolic, larger than life character, and adamantly asserts that the world is knowable and comprehensible to human beings. And I think that makes it so powerful. Plus, there's, all of these cool legends and old like myths and hauntings and stories within stories and lost documents and all of that gothic stuff that we all love. But more than that, I think it's what that story symbolized. So
Well,
I would definitely
I
choose
can't
that one.
argue with that, especially as we're going to have 8 episodes on Hound of the Baskervilles. If you have not registered for Hound of the Baskervilles, it is the only pay series that we're doing, and we're doing it to help, fund everything else that we do. And I thought that it would be a good way to do it. And we have not only these 3 co-hosts who are going to be on 1 episode each, but also Curtis Armstrong. And then we have Scott Monty from I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, who's going to be on an episode. Steve Doyle, who does the Fortnightly Dispatch, well-known Sherlockian, is going to be on one. Max McGee, a well-known Sherlockian that we all love and is in lots of science societies and is very active. And then for the first episode number 1, is going to be 2 co-hosts. It's Mark Jones and Paul Chapman do the Doings of Doyle podcast, which I absolutely love, and it'll be a lot of fun. And Paul Chapman will finally have another like bewhiskered, host on the show with me. So it'll be good that Paul and I get to do that.
Yeah, we were falling behind on that.
Yes.
Sorry,
not sorry.
So, Mary, do you have what's your favorite story?
I'm going to shout out another novel, which is The Sign of the Four. It's actually my favorite Sherlock Holmes story because for me, it's got all the things I'm interested in. It really puts, I think, at the center the relationship between Holmes and Watson and the way it is forced to change because of circumstance. And that to me has always been the most interesting things about the stories is these 2 men as individuals and their relationship with one another and to one another. It's also got a bunch of great and horrible, like colonial imperialist kind of themes.
Yeah.
And Toby features in that. Toby, the hound,
Good boy, Toby.
That's the name I gave to my dog when we adopted a dog when I was in high school, and I was trying to sell my parents. It was Jack Russell, and I was like Wishbone because I was a readerly kid, and they were like, no, no, like can you pick something like normal? And I was like, well, Toby's a good name. It's not like nerdy and weird. And they're like, okay, Toby, and I was like, yes, I win. So my dog was named after the dog in that story.
I out nerded them.
I did, as I often do.
That's
Perfect.
spectacular.
That is lovely. That is genuinely lovely.
Monica, is it Blue Carbuncle for you still?
I mean, okay, so when I wrote the essay about, for about 60, Blue Carbuncle was definitely my favorite. And in many ways it still is, just because, you know, as a mental health counselor, especially one who deals in substance abuse. Yeah, sorry guys. But we'll just say as a therapist who deals in substance abuse, Christmas is a very difficult time of year for a lot of people. And you know, it's really nice to have basically a Christmas story without the slush. You know, you know, I mean, I really like this version of you know, we'll just say that this version of basically like forgiveness. You know, right, like the a story that recognizes that sometimes justice and the letter of the law are not exactly aligned. You know, and so I love it. But you know, we'll just say is that I'm a little extra partial to the speckled band for appropriate reasons. You know, my investiture is Julia Stoner, so I've got to rock out the snacks. Yes, snacks. You know, danger noodles and snacks.
Hell yeah.
Exactly, all the snacks. But you know, I mean, I have to admit, like, I mean, I also love Sign of Four, you know, because drugs. You
Yeah,
know,
oh, I left that part out.
oh yes, drugs.
Drugs.
But the thing is,
Drugs.
though, that's why I cherry picked Sign of Four first episode, is just because you know,
That's
that
great.
is the story that got me into Sherlockian scholarship. That's the
I
first
mean, as
episode.
long as it didn't get you into drugs, I think we're
No,
good.
my brother did enough drugs for me and my other brother and my other
We're
brother and
getting into
my other
paid
brother.
content here.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, I mean, it is what it is at this point. But no, it's fascinating in that because of my profession, you know, Sign of Four gave me that opportunity to engage in Sherlockian scholarship. And you know, back in 2015, 2015, when I was writing this essay, I had not really envisioned myself again as a Sherlockian scholar. But there was a late night conversation with Jim Cox, bless you, Jim, you know, with Jim Cox, and we love Jim. But you know, he and I were talking about you know, the fact that so many people don't really understand what addiction looks like. People don't understand that you know, Holmes using drugs this often, and for the reasons why he uses the drugs, actually, you know, can be a sign of addiction. Most people just view it as like a moral failing, or they don't want to admit that their hero, their literary hero, could be, you know, somebody who struggles with addiction. And you know, a late night conversation with Jim, you know, to be fair, both of us reasonably in our cups, you know, kind of changed that. And so, you know, it was an opportunity for me to engage in Sherlockian scholarship, which has not stopped. I mean, I still have, as I'm looking at my post-it note of things to do, I still have, you know, a paper to modify to be published by the Sydney Passengers in Australia. I have a toast for the Speckled Band of Boston dinner that's coming up that I need to write, and I have to modify a presentation on about PTSD, you know, for an upcoming event as well. And so it got me. Sign of Four will always
Yeah.
be you know, we'll just say kind of a personal favorite, because it started me on the path of scholarly engagement, and I haven't looked back.
For me, Sign is still there. It just has all of the Sherlock Watson stuff. Like it's so early that Sherlock especially is still so very bohemian.
Mhm.
in sensibility, which changes a bit once the short stories start to be written, or changes over time, let's say.
It gets a little more respectable, yeah.
Yeah, and I just, and I love the extended story and the adventure that happens with the big chase and all those details in it. It's still so fresh and new, to Doyle himself, fleshing it all out. I mean, he takes this great idea that he's had in studying Scarlet, and for me, like then he finally like really presents it in a very interesting, enjoyable way, and continues with the stories, but this is the first big shot of that. But it's Man with the Twisted Lip. I love
That's a
that
great
story. I
story.
mean, it's structured so well, and it's the opium den in the beginning, that whole, atmosphere, I think, is really interesting and fun.
Holmes in disguise.
Yeah. And Blue Carbuncle is hard for me to get away from. It's a fun story. It's got funny moments in it. It's got a great ending, and it is, I think, literally perfectly constructed as a story, and and the way and where everything falls in the story as you go through it. It's this kind of masterpiece of construction. And should be the Christmas story everyone reads, like Christopher Morley wanted.
I will also say, I think the first few chapters of A Study in Scarlet, which I think you recall, I demanded to be on for those, or let's say I politely asked.
Oh, you all got your choices. I said in the very beginning,
Yeah.
tell me the ones you need to be on, and you guys all hit me up with ones. I was like, yeah, sure.
Sherlockians having opinions?
Nobody fought it out either, which was
that you know of.
Well, we're an agreeable bunch of people, we're comfortable, and we also appreciate each other's lanes.
I wouldn't have been first come, first serve. I'd have been like, until you said something, I'd have been like, okay, let's,
fight it out with
tell me why,
or something. But no, those first few chapters, I think that those are what sent me down the path of Sherlockian scholarship. Those are the first few chapters where Watson moves in with Holmes, and he's kind of like, who the hell is this guy? Which is a funny question to ask after you move in with him. I'm a bit pickier about my roommates, but okay, rent is expensive. And so he where he's trying to figure out what Holmes does and doesn't know, and he makes this list called Sherlock Holmes, His Limits. And it's been a very long time, trying to figure out what does Holmes mean when he says romance and that it's tempering with the facts. And how can we understand what Holmes does and doesn't know? And of course, it's all in the service of crime, solving crime. But I kept thinking, is there more to his scientific method? And I ended up writing this article more than 10 years ago now, which at the time won the Morley Montgomery Award for Best Article in the BSJ. And that's how I actually ended up coming to New York for the BSI weekend. Is the editor called me up and he's like, we're giving an award. You kind of have to be there to receive it. It's like, okay, I'll go to New York. But what that award or what that article was about was there's this great phrase from Alexander Pope that Holmes quotes: "The proper study of mankind is man." And so I was fascinated because this is a guy who supposedly doesn't read literature. But B, that's such a fascinating phrase to say for him as somebody who is a detective, who is a person who is essentially studying, chemistry and science and forensics, saying the proper study of mankind is man. And I started thinking, is Holmes maybe a scholar of humankind? Is he a scholar of human beings? And all of the other sciences he's interested in are in service of that larger science of understanding mankind, particularly at this moment when we have genre disciplines like anthropology and sociology. And anthropology literally means the study of man, disciplines like that emerging. So this idea of studying human beings in a more kind of formal scientific way. So I just find those first few chapters where Watson is thinking through what does and doesn't Holmes know, and how does he reason, and how does he approach the world. Um, Fodder for so much discussion about, well, he is interested in crime, but is there maybe something more to his interest in crime, like a greater underlying question about humanity that he's trying to answer in reading all of this like criminal literature.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, well said too. So
Thank you.
Oh, there's a bunch of questions here. Michael R said he says thanks for the program, and this isn't a question, but I have planned my activities around this for of weeks, and I could continue for X number of years. So
I love being
is,
penciled into people's calendars. It makes
that
me
is
feel warm and
so
fuzzy inside.
complimentary. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
This is an interesting question from Victoria. Then the kind of it's a good follow up to the ones that we've been how you've been talking about these. Which story continues to anger, annoy, frustrate you to know? I mean, and I guess it's probably best to really limit it to the ones that we've done.
Okay.
Otherwise, then we wind up having to explain the story to
yeah.
I'm always very unsatisfied with the explanation that's given at the end of the final problem, for obvious reasons. But it's written in such a way that like there's no way out of the abyss, and then of course we get that cop out line in the empty house. Well, I never was in it. I learned this secret martial art that I don't care to proofread about, and
that doesn't exist until 5 years later.
Just like the betrayal of like Mycroft knowing that he's alive and Watson not knowing that he's alive, and like that just sucks, and it just upsets me, and I don't believe that Holmes is that callous. I just refuse. This is another reason I will like plug the Granada series interpretation forever and ever and ever. When the scene where Brett hears Watson and he goes out to call out and just immediately just wants to call out to his buddy and is like, I can't.
It breaks my heart every time I watch it.
In the empty house.
Actually gives
in
me
the empty house. Yeah. It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. So totally like I'm very unsatisfied, and I'm trying to remember who among my Sherlockian friends has complained about this like loudest and or first to me. It may have been Lindsay Fay about this idea of like reversing one's boots. You can't reverse your boots. It doesn't make any sense. Like that's the explanation that's given for the one set of footprints is that Holmes is like, oh, I reversed my boots and I walked back the other way. And it's like, logistically.
Has there ever been anybody in the history of Sherlockiana that was satisfied with the final problem? Like, is there anybody?
I am.
Like, I am,
and this is fine. It's not that I'm satisfied or I'm happy when I read it. It's that it works for me. Like I don't think I think that Doyle has really conclusively written that Sherlock is dead. Now that could frustrate me or that could bother me, but I don't really find the end of itself in Final Problem to be problematic. Like I think that it's structured in a way and the pieces are there that he's dead and you've done a great job. The problems happen then in explaining out of it, I think, in the empty house.
That's fair. That's fair.
Especially
so maybe it's the empty house I have an issue with.
Yeah, especially when it's the explanation of since Moran knew somebody pointed this out in the chat for the empty house program we did too. So if Holmes knows that Moran knows he's alive, what's the point now? What's the point of staying dead if your foes know that you're actually living? Now you can actually tell Watson.
Yes.
So, because you better be on your guard, Watson. And so that's the only the parts of the explanation don't work, and that's fine. And I think it's fine actually because I think it's really hard to pick up on a lot of it on a first read of that story, even of the empty house. I think it's kind of the revelation is so astounding that it's easy to overlook that the pieces don't quite work until
we're so happy that we'll forgive it.
Yeah. Well, and so many adaptations try to like plug in those pieces where Holmes tells Watson that like Moriarty is the spider at the center of this web, and like responsible for most of the crime in London. And you kind of go, well, why never heard of him before if he's, and then of course adaptations introduce him much earlier so that he is in fact responsible for like half the crime in London because he keeps reappearing.
Yeah.
Or they do the kind of thing where I have a lot of issues with BBC Sherlock, but the way they did set up the Reichenbach fall initially before sweeping it all under the rug is, Watson is in danger and you have to either die or fake your death and like keep him in the dark. Like keeping Watson in the dark was portrayed as part of protecting him.
Yes.
Of course,
Yeah.
how that then unfolded and how that was told is questionable, but at least they tried. But I think for a lot of us who have read these stories many times and also who know the history of why the final problem was written, we kind of we see the cracks, or like, how do I put it? We see sort of, it's like when you go to the theater and if you're an actor or you're like a technician who works in the theater, like you know how they're doing the special effects because you've done them yourself. So it's like sitting there and watching and being like, I know how he's doing the trick, and I know like how and why he's pulling it off, and you just can't really suspend your disbelief. Like you can see how he's inventing this character for the purpose of killing off Holmes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a nice comment from Janice R. These shows absolutely saved me during the COVID lockdown when I was doing other biblio ventures. Thank you, Ed, and all the guests and all behind the scenes who made this possible. Bob P. also echoed those comments. I second the COVID comments, also from Kristen and V too, Vanessa. The pandemic was awful, a horror, but it did lead me to discover and enjoy these biblio ventures. And I'm a big fan of silver linings. It's the big silver lining in my life doing these shows that happen because of that. Janice also said she loved everything about the series. When I could not listen in real time, it made for great listening while working out at the gym or on some longer drives. I greatly appreciate Zoom and the YouTube and the fact that I wanted to make sure I mentioned that too, that this was the first of the series that was also just an audio podcast. When I realized that people were just listening sometimes
Hi, Bill.
to these videos, that maybe it should be an audio podcast as well. There was what's the term? What ginger? It's
Superior
the
ginger.
superior
Oh,
ginger.
my superior ginger. Yes.
They're serving Monica.
Well, yes. Oh, he deserves all of this. So.
But this show is also an audio podcast, so I know many people enjoy. I know you're listening now to the podcast, some of you, that as an audio only experience, the only thing you miss with the audio, well, you don't get to see the pictures, but you can go to the website and you can pull up those PDFs and look at them later. But you miss seeing me smoke and drink, so that's not.
And me pull faces inevitably.
That's not
and
a bad
the occasional
thing.
cameo from my husband. So. Well, normally Bill is making me drinks, but I figured that the least I could do is pour him a glass of champagne for this. So
very nice. There's another question there, but I'm going to save that question until after I do a little mid break, which we may. Let's just do now. The mid break of the show. And of course, we'll do a special. Should we do a special? And now, what do you think, guys? Should I do a special announcement?
I think it's warranted.
First, I want to thank everybody asking to donate to the Rosenbach. I always do that. You know why? I said in the beginning of the show, it's very important for us. But we also have this is the last call for the Hound of the Baskervilles limited pay only series, which will not start next week. I get one Monday off this year so far.
Huzzah!
And
date night.
And then I have 8 more. Yes, date night is on our calendar already.
Aww.
My wife and I. It's 8 weeks, all the Mondays in May and June 2024. If you're watching this in the far future, and you can't forever. So it is pay only. It's only going to be shared with the people that watch it. If you're thinking that I can't make some of those Mondays, It's okay. You'll be able to watch the recordings. The recordings will be shared with those who are registered, but that's all that the only people to be shared with. So it's going to be a fabulous show, and I really, recommend it. Hound of the Baskervilles is great, and we're really going to be reading it serially as it was originally published. So we'll keep it spoiler free. You can just read along for each week and only know that, and we won't spoil it for you. And I'll ask everybody in the chat that's watching and not to spoil it for you. Like, we'll really try to do it as best we can, like the original reader. So if you're new to it, it's a really fun way to approach it. And we also announced our fall biblio venture. The next weekly one, Monsters and Ghosts, which will be The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, which we have a wonderful first edition in our collections. We have other Robert Louis Stevenson things too, including, I think it's his own copy of a book called Deacon Brodie, which he wrote, which is about this criminal in Edinburgh who is also like this kind of stalwart, respectable member of the community, but on the side, he was a criminal. And it's kind of the idea of Jekyll and Hyde, and which Stevenson actually mentioned, wrote about. And so it's great. We have connections in our collection to that. And we're doing a Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol with ghosts. It's really the most famous ghost story ever.
It's so good. I'm sorry. I love A Christmas Carol. And I do think the definitive adaptation is The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Well, of course, because Michael Caine actually took it seriously. Like, he's
so good.
Serious as a heart attack.
Yeah.
So
Muppets.
good.
Yeah.
I saw somebody say, like, the reason that Muppet Christmas Carol works is because Michael Caine behaves like all the Muppets are his fellow actors, and the reason Treasure Island works is because Tim Curry treats himself as though he is a Muppet.
Exactly. No, I endorse this. I'll just say I very much endorse this philosophy. I agree wholeheartedly.
That works.
I'm very excited for A Christmas Carol because I just really think, despite how many adaptations it's been through, reading
it's always fun.
Nothing like it.
And we'll do the deep dive, talk about each chapter, each stave as it is. It'll be so much fun to go into it in depth. Yeah. We have great first edition of Christmas Carol and other things at the Rosenbach to share as well.
Oh yeah.
But the special announcement. Oh, did you have something?
No. I was just going to say the shout out to the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, which does an annual Christmas story, presentation, as part of their season. The Christmas story at the Guthrie is amazing. Like, there have been some very, very big heavy hitters in the we'll just say in the acting world who have played Scrooge in the Christmas Carol, or at the Guthrie. So always an annual favorite, and so yay. But you have
the Goodman
and it is
a
way cooler announcement than my talk about Minneapolis theater.
Oh, there's like every city has a big Christmas. I mean, they really do, because it's that big, and everybody has one, and it's a cash cow because everybody wants that story.
Well, I mean, that the Guthrie does it like annually for decades now.
It still works, and it's really wonderful. Actually, there was another little question from Janice about the Hound show. She's like, when will the syllabus for the Hound be posted? It's already on the webpage for the Rosenbach. You can see the breakdown of all the weeks of the story.
The syllabus there will be homework.
And no homework, just reading. And also on that schedule is when each co-host will be appearing. So when the co-host is on. So maybe you're like, I don't want to see Mary and Monica, but I want to see Anastasia. Which week is Anastasia on? They will definitely know which week to tune in. So hey, we've all got our fan groups.
Listen, we all have our faves. I get it.
That's it. Exactly. The big announcement. The big announcement is that Sherlock will return. It won't return weekly as we've been doing, but it will become Sherlock monthly. Starting in November, and it's got to be November, we will pick up where we left off after The Empty House with The Adventure of the Norwood Builder. And I will just do one story a month. There'll be Saturdays. I think it's going to be the third Saturday of the month in the afternoon. If you can make it live, it's always wonderful. If you can't make it live, you can watch the recordings. I'm doing my Pickwick monthly still. until October. That's a 20-month show because Dickens publishes, his serials in 20 parts. So it takes us 20 months to go over it in the same time frame, the March to the October of the following year. And that will finish in October. And then as soon as that is done, I can return to Sherlock. So yes, everybody, Sherlock will come back. We will do the rest of the stories.
He will climb back out of the Reichenbach
Yes.
through.
Oh, he has already,
magic.
but he will just continue now and read.
So
He'll just continue climbing.
yes, he climbed out and empty. Well, we found out he climbed out the last episode,
week,
empty
yeah.
house, and then we will continue it, but it won't be until November. It's just, there's only so many things I could do.
You get your plots confused otherwise.
And there's still 32 more stories to go.
Exactly, and one more full novel.
So if it takes me 3 years, and it takes me 3 years, that's what we'll do. So we will.
You know what, Ed? You're not going to be sad about the 3 years you spend on this.
No, and it will be great because I'm hoping you guys will all come on. A show, multiple shows. But then I can really expand it. And there's so many Sherlockians. I wanted to have more Sherlockian guests for this series, but then it came to a point where after the first few, I was kind of like, we need to concentrate on the stories. This is what the show needs to be. And then and we did that. So there's so many people that out there that I would love to have on that can now be on. But Sherlock Monthly will be the show. So
that has such a good ring to it,
We don't even have to alter the the artwork. Let me put a shout out to the artwork.
There's an artwork to this.
Well, it's just he's gonna change Mondays to monthly because I love this artwork so much.
It's so good.
This is Scott Banks created this. Scott Banks is a great artist, graphic artist. He created the artwork for this. He also did our Dracuthon artwork for the Rosenbach.
Gorgeous. And I'm very jealous of your portrait, which is so cool.
I know, and I got this little
your portrait is fantastic.
Portrait down the bottom right there with my pipe. There I am.
So cool.
I love that. That's my avatar on several things now.
It's so cool. I'm so jealous.
I'm loving it.
But this, and there's the horizontal version. It's so beautiful. I mean, he came out. This is his own text. He designed this font. So
fantastic.
So he made this, and it works really well. And then it'll just be Sherlock Monthly coming in the fall. That we'll get to put out there for everyone. So I hope you will enjoy that show. I'm really excited to be able to continue doing the Sherlock stories.
One cocktail a month is much easier than 4.
Yeah.
I imagine. Oh my God.
I'll be able to take over. I'll be able to take over those. I also want to give a shout out to the credit sequence. Scott did that great graphic, and then he also created the credit sequence that we have on the show. Which is just slightly animated. I was like, he just slightly animate it, and we'll do, and it just came up. It's like they're on the train with the things going by the window. It looks so good. It works so well. So thank you so much, Scott, for that. But I also want to give a shout out to the theme music that Tucker Christine created. Tucker Christine creates music as Pleated Gazelle is his musician name. He's done the music for all of the Biblioventures that we've done. He began with Sundays with Dracula, in which he was one of the co-hosts because he's a Dracula collector. And he was a co-host on Sundays with Dracula and did music for it. And then has done music for every show. He's already working the music for the fall shows. The Jekyll and Hyde theme is just like so good. And he's working on Christmas Carol right now. So a big shout out to Tucker for doing these things for the Rosenbach. It's greatly appreciated. He also now publishes a magazine called Dracula Beyond Stoker, in which he publishes stories based on characters from the novel Dracula. And I know all this because I'm the consulting editor. What that means is Tucker's like, hey Ed, check out all this cool stuff. And I'm like, oh my God.
Neato burrito.
Awesome. And he does all the work. But I highly recommend Dracula Beyond Stoker. The first issue was about stories that were about the character Dracula. And then there was an issue on Renfield. And then there was an issue on Lucy. And the latest one that it's coming out now is an issue on the brides of Dracula. So they're really great stuff. And I love giving Tucker a plug because he's so wonderful to do all of that stuff. And another thank you I want to give out during the show, not wait till the very end doing the show, is I want to thank our chat, Mrs. Hudson, Brianna, who has handled all of the links in the chat and is behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Brianna, who's been working at the Rosenbach for years now. I don't even know how long, Brianna. But thank you so much for handling this behind the scenes stuff so I can do the show. So it's always needed. Sherlock Tales. Let's talk about Sherlock Tales. Mary, this is wonderful. I had created drinks for all of Dracula, and then I had Art and the Age in Philadelphia and Kinsey distilleries do the cocktails for not Tamworth Distilling in New Hampshire, and Art and the Age store in Philadelphia do the cocktails for Frankenstein, and that was enjoyable. But I still had to jump back in. I only did a few cocktails for Jane Eyre because I didn't think that was a cocktail-heavy novel. But Pride and Prejudice we did after that. Then again, I did all the cocktails for every episode. And
those were fun, yeah.
I was kind of done. I didn't have any more. I'm like, how many more cocktails am I going to do? And so I was so happy that you were like, yeah. And I was like, even, hey, you don't have to do all of them. You just do some. And you were like, no.
No, I'm like, if I'm going to do this.
Every story.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. That was great for me.
I hope everyone enjoyed them. I sure love them. And how did you like? Is it? I mean, some of them are adapted, but tell me.
A lot of them are adaptations.
Together.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. I mean, like, full disclosure and shout out as well to Mainline Center for Bartending in Manayunk, because that's where I trained as a bartender. I went to bartending school. I know that the way that some people can learn things through experience, and that's wonderful, but I am a huge nerd and I have to study the thing. So I went to bartending school, like right as the pandemic was letting some of us out into the world. And so I learned bartending in like a very academic kind of way, as I learned everything. But then there's just no substitute for the real thing of mixing flavors and trying things out. So yeah, oftentimes when I'm coming up with these drinks, I will pick, I love a pun. I'll pull a pun or something either from the title of the story, or I'll make an in joke. I was like absurdly pleased with myself about Sophie's Choice a couple of weeks ago because it was the PHY Sophie. I was like, I'm gonna get away with this. So sometimes I come up with the title and then I build the drink around it. Like the Agra Treasure, I knew I wanted to be the Agra sort of acronym. And I just had to play with flavors that worked. I sort of made a list of different ingredients that I could think of with those letters. And I had to experiment on my friends. I was like, because I'm not really a whiskey drinker at all. I'm very much a gin girl, and I hope I haven't been too biased towards gin in the Sherlock Tales. I always worry that I have been. But I have friends who are whiskey drinkers and bourbon drinkers. And so I say, hey, I've got to make the next batch for the next couple of months. Can you try this? Would you see, let me know what you think. And it's been a great excuse for me to get friends together, to try things out, to experiment on my own as a bartender with flavors. And then, yeah, some things just lend themselves very well where you like a classic cocktail, but you just want to change it up. Like you were saying, Ed, with your martini, right? Like you were like,
that's all you need to do.
Yeah, you're like, you know what, I really like this thing, and what if I just like with the final word last week or 2 weeks ago, the final problem. That's a twist on the last word, which is a classic cocktail. But what can you do with it to sort of jazz it up a little bit? What can you do to add either herbs or flavors that are significant to the place or the setting of what's going on in the story? Or do they have some sort of deeper meaning? I played with the same sort of thing when we did a Case of Identity with the Empress Gin that changes color. And the fun challenge for me on this has been, I mean, this part hasn't been fun, where I've been moving around all year, and so away from my bar cart and away from my ingredients. But I have been keenly aware of the fact that I want this to be as accessible as possible, because not everybody has a bartender's bar cart at home.
Yeah.
And there's some things you just don't keep in stock.
Or
So I try to be as flexible as I can.
or someone to serve them during the show. It's
Or
usually
someone
the way
just
I
around.
heard
I
they
love that
nailed
this
perfect
show,
timing to
Monica
walk
is
in.
serving Bill instead of
I
the
love
other
it.
way around.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, baby.
There you go. Well done.
Oh,
I love
So-
that.
yeah,
Did
so
you
it's
wind
been
up with a
tremendous fun.
favorite? Did you wind up with a favorite, Mary?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a cat behind Mary, and
Oh,
that's
yes,
like
that's
that's like very important to point out.
I know,
And then
I
there
know.
are cats.
Shelley always has to be the center of attention. This is Shelley Cat. Shelley is named after Mary Shelley.
After Mary.
Because we adopted
Well,
her.
for Percy, I would understand. always needed to be the center
Well,
of attention.
Mary,
yes.
Mary, I
I
wouldn't
think your cat
understand.
has a double, because I've discovered a stray that looks exactly like Shelly just outside my house, who
That's
keeps
why.
coming
Is that the
by.
salami cat? I'm obsessed with
Yeah.
that salami cat.
Yeah, he keeps coming by, and you just pure black cat. He's just sitting there watching you as you walk up to your
Oh my
apartment in the
God.
dark.
I used to have a black cat. Do you know what his name was?
Was it Poe?
It was Edgar Allan Poe. Yep.
Oh,
Edgar.
that's
Ah!
fantastic.
I'm so
Poe's-
shocked.
I had a
I
cat
am
named
really
Edgar,
shocked.
and I had a cat named
Shocked
Nathaniel.
and incensed.
You had a cat named Nathaniel?
And Nathaniel Hawthorne and Nathaniel and Edgar. They were my cats. Yeah.
Okay, that's so cute. I love that.
All right.
No,
Back
Shelley
to,
is
back to
named
Sherlock Tales.
Well,
yes.
Shelley definitely looks like he has an opinion about Sherlock Holmes and is ready to
She
share.
needs to be the center. She's a Leo. She can't help it. She needs to be the center of attention at all times.
Oh, wait,
Did you,
oh,
Mary,
I
have
know.
a favorite?
I had a lot of fun with the Christmas goose, which
Yeah.
is kind of like a Moscow mule, but like more festive.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to think what else. I'm skimming through my own recipes right now. I really enjoyed. What's the one? What did I end up calling? No, I really enjoyed the final problem, because I love a last word cocktail, and it's great if you can get the chartreuse. I was at a bar last week where I could get chartreuse because
Oh, very good. Yeah, I love
saw
the
it on the
idea of that.
menu.
I think I'm like, I would have loved to have that with chartreuse.
Yeah.
No, I just adapted and did something else.
I know. Well, I
And
workshopped
it was
it in my
totally good, but I really wanted to have
But
that.
it was different, right? Like that was one of those ones that I, full disclosure, did not make before I did the
Yeah.
recipe. I knew that it would work because the last word works.
Yeah.
And I know that those notes work with chartreuse. But that's like this knowledge as opposed to like this knowledge. So I was at a bar last weekend actually, and I saw chartreuse on the menu, and I said, "But do you actually have chartreuse?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I have green and yellow chartreuse." And I said, "Okay."
Oh
I'm
my
not gonna
gosh.
tell you it's scarce now, buddy.
It's terrible.
Very
It
scarce.
is.
I'm like, "Okay, do me a solid, like, professional courtesy, one bartender to another. Would you make me a last word, but would you make a little modification?" And so I did the little mods with him, with the Saint Germain and with some of the herbs. And I was like, I nailed this. This was so
Good.
good. So I think that the final problem may have actually been my favorite.
Wow. All righty.
Yeah.
I couldn't come up with one. I love the Agra Treasure,
Mhm.
Aperol, Rye, Amaro,
Yeah.
Grenadine. But I did have mine with Campari, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I mean, and I
Oh,
often sub
Aperol.
Campari.
Just because I like that. I like the Campari better than the sweeter Aperol.
Yes.
Not that I don't like, I'm an Aperol spritzer, that's fine. I like those, but I did like it with the Campari. I love the Contralto from
I do too.
You too.
That was gin, Lillet Blanc, and the little Campari. Campari is a thing that I add to lots of things to change it up, and so that really worked for me. And I love the Gaslighters tonic that you make for Identity with Case of Identity with the Empress gin changing colors, and
Oh yes.
that's really good. And I have to say that not only did I like the Bell Pull for Scandal Bohemia, which was a kind of a bourbon milk punch. I was at a Science meeting, Sherlockian meeting yesterday online, and it was all about the Speckled Band. This is the great Alkali Plainsman, the new great Alkali
Yes.
group, and Speckled Band. So I thought I'd have that, and I had two giant bell pulls over the course of the meeting, and it's still really, really well
Holds
done.
up.
It holds up, right?
Yeah.
It holds up.
I
Yeah.
had
Although
fun with
I
some
do have to
stars.
admit, Bill during Speckled Band, gave me a bell pull. Oh my God, I think I got a little extra tipsy during the Speckled.
Woohoo!
But Bill made a bell pull for me, but then also decided to do his own version of like something, but it had absinthe in it, and that kind of kicked my butt. Um, it was quite lovely. He wanted to do absinthe because green, snake.
Yes.
But yeah, it was. We'll just say is that the bell pull was lovely, but whatever the heck my husband made afterwards was amazing, but also kicked my butt. So,
I would love to throw an absinthe cocktail in there as we continue the
well,
Sherlock stories.
I'm with Devil's Foot.
Yeah.
I think would be the appropriate time to do so.
You might be right.
Well, it's
I
been
am
absolutely
sorry I
wonderful.
cannot add to the cocktail conversation. I've been just traveling much too
Yeah.
much to have
Anastasia
anything
drinks
like
whatever
that.
she has on hand for these
Yeah.
shows,
Whatever
usually.
I have in whatever location I'm
Yeah.
located in.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
so
I'm
many
lucky
cocktails.
I have a bartender available to me.
It's always helpful to have a bartender on hand.
So
Oh,
many
God,
cocktails for you to try, Anastasia. It'll be wonderful.
Yeah, I am looking forward to being in one place for a certain amount of time, and maybe making all of these and trying them, not all at the same time, but
Definitely not recommended.
Well, I mean, actually, Bill is taking some. We'll just say he's taking some inspiration from your
I love
cocktails, Mary. Bill has been asked to do some of like cocktails and mocktails for the
Mm.
Norwegian Explorers conference in July.
Oh, how
And
fun.
so Bill has basically been kind of like playing with some of the cocktails that you have
I love that.
created,
We
and then
all
basically
build
he's been
on.
Yeah, it's like
adjusting and
whisper down the
tweaking.
lane. It's like
Yeah.
Mary took this one, made a
Yeah,
change. Bill done take it, make a change.
Oh yeah.
By
we
the end,
all
it'll be
know this,
like,
right?
what?
Yeah,
Why
we
is there
need to
gin
come
in
up
this
with something
bourbon
with
drink?
aquavit.
Right.
So
There's
it's
there's a
all about
limited
aquavit.
number of things out there, right? And like we all find something that we like from a bartender that we like or a drink that we like,
Yeah,
and we just tinker with it a little bit and make it our own. And I
exactly.
love the creativity of that in
Well,
bartending.
yeah. Well, I mean, and we had a version of the Blue Carbuncle for our wedding, like almost 10 years ago. It was like a combination of vodka, Rose's blue raspberry, like mixer, blue curacao, and then lemon juice. And
Very nice.
I mean, so it's like a blue sweet tart, but it was perfect to go along with the sonic screwdriver, because Bill's a Whovian, I'm a Sherlockian. It's a mixed marriage, so
It's
it
a mixed,
works.
right? Exactly.
Exactly. Gotta have appropriate representation. So because it was the Matt Smith era, we did a standard screwdriver with a little bit of blue curacao to change the orange juice to green, so to match Matt Smith's sonic screwdriver. So
My napkin is the
oh,
I
the
saw
exploding TARDIS, which
that.
is fantastic.
Delightful.
Oh, that's fantastic.
that's Kate and so I think Sophie made these. My daughter Sophie made these when she was home. They for people are like, come on, why are you having like what, like the smoking fits the stories that I
Yeah.
do, but what's with all the cocktails?
Why not?
Read, drink, repeat is tends to be, I just think it makes things more enjoyable for me. And although I do recognize that, there some people could have, problems with it, and then it could cause problems and all that. And you should, Monica knows this as a drug and
Yeah.
alcohol counselor, that you should be careful and make decisions wisely. But in the way I like to do it with my books and with talking about this stuff really works well, and I'm very happy. Thank you.
Making it work.
The other thing that I do during shows is smoke a pipe, and I said I would smoke a pipe for every show, and I stuck to it, and I did. And these are all the pipes that I smoked during the show.
They're visuals.
There
Oh
you
my.
go.
Oh
All of
Oh
these.
my
All the
goodness.
pipes.
This, and in the middle you see there's like a cigar, because I did this Fuente cigar for one of the episodes. I can't remember which one. Was it Case of Identity? I can't remember the one where he's just smoking a cigar and he mentions it a couple times. I'm not 100% sure. It was a Case
Okay,
of
so the question is,
Anyway.
any Petersons in there?
So yes,
Which one is the
this is a
Peterson?
Peterson right here.
Yep.
If that might be it.
Yeah, I mean, Peterson did a line
That's
of
the
Sherlock
Peterson.
Holmes
I have
pipes
two identical
years and years
Petersons,
ago. Yeah.
and then this is one of them.
Yeah,
I
the
don't think
tattoo I
that
have on
any
my
other.
back actually has a Peterson Sherlock Holmes original design. That's not a Sherlock Holmes original, but it's still a lovely Peterson pipe.
Peterson has a line of them of Sherlock pipes. Look, there's a poster back here that
Yeah.
somebody sent me this picture of all the
Oh
Peterson
yes.
pipes, which was really nice in a
Yeah.
frame. But
And more
clay
collection.
pipes
Oh.
and the cherry wood that I love. There's another
Oh.
cherry here. Just as you know, the all the pipes that I smoke. This one here, I smoked it twice. That was the one I did smoke twice, but I also on the clay pipe show I smoked two, so I could get an extra pipe in.
Brilliant.
It's nice
Mhm.
for me to be able to do this work at home and where I can
Do
I
what you
couldn't do
do.
it. I couldn't do it if we were at the Rosenbach.
Could not do it in the Rosenbach among the rare books.
No.
So, and finally we did Dracula, Frankenstein, Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, and we finally got the stories where it literally fit the story. It took me long enough, right? So there was a great
Is there
question.
any pipe smoking in Jekyll and Hyde? I don't recall.
There will be when I read it, let me tell you.
Oh heck yeah. Well, no, that's fantastic. Plus, actually, there was a question I just saw online about, I want to joke about my special cocktail tonight, which is tobacco, brandy, and Coke. Bless you, Janine. But no, I'm from the state of Wisconsin originally, and brandy is like the state drink. I mean, brandy old fashions are very much a cultural thing in the state of Wisconsin, and so I'm like, Dr. Watson would approve of the state of Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
So cheers.
Cheers.
We had a great question from Laura
Yes.
Ann, which was what makes these stories so readable over and over? She says, aside from my memory, haha, I think one reason is it feels
Us
nice to
too.
be back in their world, like being with old friends. And absolutely. I
Yes.
think that feeling of being in their world and also like them as people is a big draw for great books and great movies and maybe even great art. When I was in college, we had a great painting by uh uh the painting is I can't believe that his name's out of my head, the painter. The painting is of Louisa, the Countess of Sandwich. And I can't, I don't know why this name's out of my head. It's out of my head because I'm drinking and smoking every show. But I love this paint, and I could sit by this painting, and I felt like I knew her, and I would sit and read by it all the time, and like I felt like I was in that world when I was in front of this painting. And the same thing can happen with books and movies and too. But what are some other why are these stories so readable? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I can answer why they're so readable for me. I don't know that that's going to
Yeah,
be everybody's. In
and
fact, I'm
and
pretty sure
yeah,
it's not going to
that's
be
right.
everybody's
But
answer.
that's always the right answer is that your own
Yeah,
reading
it's
experience is what
yours.
we're kind of, sharing
Well,
here.
I will say that I very much think of myself as a kind of intellectual historian where I'm very interested in works of literature as like artifacts that crystallize and preserve a moment in time. Like, how did people think at a moment in time? How did they believe the world to be at that moment in time? And for me, the Sherlock Holmes stories are such great artifacts. They're such brilliant representations of what were the Victorians worried about and concerned about, which was, the colonies, empire, foreign things, crime and urbanization. What were their values, which had so much to do with science and progress and positivism, but also its darker side. There's just a whole world in there, a world you can inhabit, but also a whole world of how did this society 100 years removed from us, which was living in a completely different context, what did they think the world was like? And what did they value? And Sherlock Holmes is in so many ways, as I said earlier, a representation of what their values are or what they looked up to. It was like a kind of cultural hero in the same way that we have pop cultural heroes today. So for me, it's I guess in the same way that Sherlock Holmes is always like digging up, traces and constructing narratives about them, for me, it's digging up traces of a past and understanding what that past was like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and you know me, I mean, I'm kind of more of a literary historian than I am, a literary critic, and so much of that is bound up in there, is the getting into their heads, and that's the connection that I feel. So, Mary?
I think about the nostalgia factor a lot with the Sherlock Holmes stories. And certainly I've said this before about the BSI as an organization, the Baker Street Irregulars. This is an organization that starts in like the
1934.
Yeah, thank you. 1934.
No worries.
And this is an organization that I've said before is born nostalgic. Like the era that it is celebrating has already passed. This idea of a bunch of guys getting together and they're going to drink, they're going to smoke and drink and be in a gentleman's club and pretend it's 1895 and play this game has already passed them by. And I think I've noticed a pattern, and I know this is true of me, and I've noticed a pattern among other Sherlockians, of when we come to these stories. I was 12. I don't know about you guys, but like that seems to be around that age.
I was older, but everybody's like, I read these as a kid, and I didn't have that. But
girls and boys maturing faster.
Well, yeah, believe me, I know.
The father of how many girls?
Yeah, 5 daughters, so I know.
Bless you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I came to this at 12. A lot of people I think do, and that's a tough age. It's an age where you're not really sure about the world. You're starting to come into your own. You're starting to realize that the world is not this like sort of safe, comfy place, that your parents have created this safe space for you as a kid. And Sherlock Holmes is this restorer of order and all things good, and the power of logic to conquer any problem and to be the hero at the end of the day. And I think that feeds into the nostalgia factor. I think there's something in that for us personally, but I think that was certainly appealing to these guys getting together in the 1930s, thinking of a simpler time. They were between world wars. I mean, they thought the great horrible war was behind them, but also I'm sure that they were getting this sense that things were not so great, going to start up again.
But we're talking about, that's also nostalgia, and that nostalgia isn't real. And that it is that, it's what we imagine. Like we don't think of all the people dying of cholera. We think that, everything is nice, and that kind of view of the past that makes things. But Doyle's in it, though. Doyle's
in it.
He's almost especially as he continues to write the stories, they don't move out of 1895,
No, I mean, they do and they don't. They slowly eke into the Edwardian era.
Yeah.
But
the last bow clearly has to be.
It has to, but there's something that always feels jarring about that.
Yeah.
For me, I do think it has to do with the nostalgia both of the society and as us as individuals of when we come to this particular work. There's something I was reading that was like the music that you liked when you were a preteen, when you were going through puberty, like congratulations, that's the music that is going to be your nostalgia music. So I think there's something like that to be said about.
I'm still listening
about literature as well.
I'm still listening to Bruce. So
Bruce Springsteen is great. I'm still listening to EDM but back in the day it was called techno. So it's a lot of oons music, but yes. But no, to basically kind of piggyback on Mary's comment, I mean, all I can think of at this moment is like the last stanza of A Long Evening with Holmes, by Bill Schweikart. The last stanza is, so this modern rat race can't keep me in a cage. I have a passport to a far better age, as close as a bookshelf, as near as a page, and then I can spend a long evening with Holmes. I mean, it's escapism. It's a retreat back to an era where good was good, evil was evil, and good always prevailed. Where there was some sense of justice and right and wrong. And in the world that we live in, it's so very shades of gray. And it's nice to be able to return to, or to go to, a literary space that reflects a moment in history where at least in this fictional world or this fictional version of this moment in history, things turn out all right. And I think many of us are really genuinely looking for a space where, things are okay and things are predictable and things, turn out the way that they should. Because, if we look around in this world, there's so many injustices, there's so many things that should go the way that they don't. And
Yeah, things turn out all right, but also Sherlock Holmes is such a compassionate character.
yeah,
So often we've talked about this.
yeah,
He's the person who will try to make you feel better, who will take your case even
exactly,
if you can't afford it,
exactly.
and who will sort of sometimes say, well, the Queen's justice isn't going to work here, but I'm going
I'm
to
going to exact
make a
justice.
decision that supersedes the law. And
Yeah,
I
justice
mean,
tempered with mercy, and like true justice. No,
yeah, well, I
That's
not
mean,
good.
and in the
That's
real
good.
world,
Yeah.
somebody acting outside the law is maybe not quite so comforting, but in the context of the Sherlock Holmes stories, it is comforting, especially
no,
because it so often extends protection to people who otherwise in Victorian
would
society as it functioned would not have had protection. So yes, I think there's a lot of people who can find comfort in that.
yeah.
Yeah, and Sherlock, had I mean, Blue Carbuncle, especially when he frees
Mhm.
the criminal at the end, and
Yeah,
because it's Christmas, so it's the season. Or he doesn't say the season of forgiveness. Is that what he says? So,
okay.
so he
Yes.
lets him go, and Holmes is very much interested in. He's interested in justice. He's not interested in the law, and that's one of the things that really came through to me in these stories. And the other thing, which I think for me makes these stories so readable, is
Hmm.
the relationship of Holmes and Watson. Now, I knew this ahead of time, of course, but I
Hmm.
had it so reinforced in doing this deep dive and really paying careful attention to the stories as they're published in the beginning, as they've gone through the first 27 we've done now, that the Holmes and Watson relationship is so important to this. And those characters themselves are, we mentioned this on one of the shows, I can't remember which, regarding mysteries. And like, do you read these stories of mysteries? Because some of these stories are fair play mysteries, and you could put it together because Sherlock or Watson is telling you all the stuff that you need to know, and
Yeah.
you can put it together. But most people don't read these for the mysteries. While we read them for are the characters. We read them for
Mhm.
Sherlock. We read them for
Yeah.
Watson. I think the big part of that is how their relationship, their interaction, and how they're friends, and how what doesn't become what isn't the common image of Holmes is that he is actually so compassionate and he is so concerned with Watson and his feelings, and even though sometimes he'll dig at him, he does that. He definitely
And,
does that. But at the
well, I
same
mean,
time,
that's what you do to your siblings, right? The
right.
people that you love as siblings, you give them a little bit of crap every now and
And
again.
he shows up in empty house after he knows that Watson has thought he was dead, and 9 times in that story he says, "My dear Watson," 9 times. Now
Yeah.
that's not even. Doyle's not sitting, and there's two others. There's also a "My dear chap" and "fellow." So it's 11 times that he says "dear" to Watson. That's not Doyle sitting down saying, like, I really want to emphasize how Sherlock is really
Yeah.
good. He just knows it in his head
Just,
that this is the relationship between these characters, and Holmes would automatically, this
yeah.
is the way he'd be behaving towards
Oh,
him.
and not only that, but I think there's a recognition that he totally wounded Watson in, by not sharing,
Yeah.
we'll just say, status as a living human being, and such. I mean, it's basically attending to Watson's feelings. Like, I love you, I care about you, you are my friend, you are my dear Watson. I mean, it's actually the most compassionate thing that Holmes can do in the empty house to basically continue to emphasize that Watson is someone who is important to him, hence my dear Watson.
Yeah. I had there were a couple questions earlier. How many pipes do you own, from Elizabeth Penn? And I'm
Mhm.
not sure, but
Too many.
it's probably like 60 or so. It's not like a crazy amount. I know pipe smoker guys who have like hundreds of pipes. I wish I did. You know, I just never spend that much money on things. But when you're a pipe smoker like I am, you need to constantly keep your pipes in rotation. So I can't own 10 pipes because I would smoke all those in a couple days or maybe 3 days, and then I'd be, you know, like you need space. So I work through all of my pipes, and then I mean sometimes you grab another one because it's a favorite here and there, but only a 60 or so. Maybe that's it.
Only 60.
Amanda asked, did Doyle smoke? Just wondering. Oh, yes, he did. Yeah, and he smoked the pipe and cigars and really enjoyed tobacco. And I think we've even having stories where, who is it? It's Percy Phelps in Percy Phelps in Naval Treaty. Says, "Oh, I don't smoke," and I think that that's Doyle's way of letting us know that like this is like not quite the way a man should behave and be. That it's a judgment when that character says he doesn't smoke. Of course you don't smoke. You suffer from brain fever. Couple little questions. Somebody did mention about Holmes being the original superhero, and I saw you already. And somebody said that the painter of the painting of the Countess Sandwich, Thomas Lawrence.
Yeah,
Thomas Lawrence is that painting. It's the painting's actually called Hope.
Yeah, I looked it
on
up.
an anchor on a shore, and if you look at the painting then now, if you can look it up, and you'll be like, Ed, you just like the hot girl. Maybe I did. Maybe I was just in love with the Countess of Sandwich.
Both be true.
You know, I mean, beautiful people are beautiful. So
nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
So,
Holmes is kind of the original superhero. Yeah, I think of these Holmes stories as being like, if you think about post 9/11 Marvel and the rise of the superhero and the way that we were a troubled society in the West looking for a sense of order and justice, I think the Victorian era has Sherlock Holmes for that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, plus he did die and rise from the dead. So, I mean, you know, basically he couldn't be killed off.
Yeah.
You know, and continues to live. And so that's a very superhero trait, except for possibly Tony Stark in Endgame. But you know,
give it spoilers, shut up.
Oh, it's been a few years.
It's
That's
been
like a decade.
Spoiler needs to be like
see,
many
I'm
decades, like
just
100
so
years
accustomed to being
ago.
like, yeah, I mean, I'm a film critic, you know, usually it's like a year before I will talk about spoilers, just because I will do you know, analysis of cinema. So, you know, we're about 7 years past you know, Endgame.
My kids didn't know there was a mad woman in the attic. Okay, let me say that. I'm not saying anything else. That they didn't know it, and they read the book first time, and I got to watch them as they were reading it. It was so awesome.
Oh my!
That's so delightful.
Didn't know. So
delightful.
I also didn't know that Darth. And this is a spoiler that I can give out. They didn't know Darth Vader was Luke's father. They were like, "What?"
Vader
How do you like
is
grow
like,
up
Norwegian,
in Western culture and like not know that?
That is amazing. I'm thinking
I
of
mean,
that woman who
they
just
weren't that old, but they still got to watch it at a conscious age when it happened. So.
I'm thinking about that woman on Twitter who just went viral for like hearing the rumors, the Fleetwood Mac Rumors album for the first time. Have you guys?
Oh my God!
My
like
favorite
they
thing.
all slept with each other and they all hated each other.
Watching
and
her
other.
tweet this in real time, I was like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." Was her realizing, "Wait, they were all breaking up?" I'm like, "I love this for you."
No. Actually, I appreciate that. I was just at a film festival. I was at Roger Ebert's film festival, Ebert Fest in Champaign, Illinois, and I got to sit next to a couple, or like the row behind me. There were two people who had never seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and it's like, oh my God, you guys are in for the best like experience.
And by best, you mean saddest friggin' thing to ever happen.
Saddest freaking thing ever, but also like one of the most amazing cinematic experiences like ever, you know, because of the layers within layers within layers within layers. Pre what Inception. So
yeah.
Yeah,
I did show my partner The Usual Suspects for the first time, and that was also very satisfying.
I was just gonna say, you know,
way.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist, and like that, he's gone.
So good.
Sorry, I'm a total fangirl for.
I can add to that story by saying I've probably told this story, but when I was a kid, you know, I read the adventures and the memoirs. My mom told me, well, that's all there was, and so I stopped there at my
no.
You told that
was it for like literally a decade, and then when like BBC Sherlock and all the other stuff was happening, I was like, I should go reread the Sherlock Holmes stories. And then I realized that there were more, but for like a good decade, because I was reading the stories with my mom when I was like, I don't know, 9 or something. And so we finished the final problem, we closed the book, and my mom was like, well, it's sad, it's a tragedy, it's the death of a good man. Fiction is like that sometimes, or whatever parents like tell you when your favorite character dies. And I was
Yeah.
sort of like, well, that's sad, but okay. And I went outside to like play.
Yeah. And you just
You
didn't
were,
realize that. And then it was months later that you discovered that, wait a minute.
And literally a decade later, like literally, I just lived the Victorian 10 years.
oh
Or
man,
a black
that's
I
armband.
don't
the
think, wow,
very,
yeah, Mary, I guess you haven't heard this story. I love how delighted you are by that.
oh, oh no,
Oh, I
that's,
heard it because you said it on your first. I mean, I remember you talking about that.
yeah.
That's just wonderful.
No, when I
I'm
was
so
a
happy you
kid,
were so that you didn't know that Sherlock was
oh
alive.
no, actually the funny thing is that I kind of had a parallel experience, but in a much shorter time frame. When I was a kid, I hadn't read the entire canon. By the time that I came across the Jeremy Brett series, so the Granada series, it was I had basically read Blue Carbuncle, Red-Headed League, and the Speckled Band. And then I finally, flipping through channels, I came across the Granada series. And of course, the episode was the Red-Headed League, which was then immediately followed by the final problem.
Yeah. And
And
they
like I
linked them.
was so
Moriarty's at
in,
the end of Red-Headed
yeah.
League and everything, so they linked them. It's really cool.
Oh no, it was perfect. But the thing is though, is that like 13-year-old, or sorry, 11-year-old like Monica, like who had never read the stories before, was like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. I like with Red-Headed League. And then like the next week, oh crap, they just killed off the character. And my poor parents had no idea how to like rein in the emotions of like this distraught like 10-year-old or 12-year-old. I mean, like they just killed off Sherlock Holmes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then my aunt for Christmas decided to buy me the canon,
That's
after
what I would
hearing
have
my
done.
mother lament to her
Yeah.
about, her sister about like, my daughter is like distraught. And it's like, oh, wait, there's more stories? What?
I
What?
would have just I
What?
would have just read you the next story the next day. Oh no,
Well,
I
my
would have made you read
parents,
Hound of the Baskervilles first. And
yeah,
then
Oh
well,
yeah.
my parents weren't aware. Like, I'm rural Wisconsin. My parents are lovely people, but they are also not really like big readers. And so like I had to kind of like wait for an external influence to basically bring me back to the actual like literature and to buy me, a Christmas gift of the Doubleday edition of the canon. But I mean, I get it though, is that it's
yeah.
like it's a specific moment in time and a specific adaptation, but it's also very emotional and transformative, and it's the right age for it. So it was amazing.
Here's a very interesting question from Amanda. Did Doyle have his own Watson?
Hmm.
Mm.
And my first reaction is that no, he didn't in his real life. But then I think about the stories and I think of how much of Doyle is in Watson
Yeah, Doyle is Watson.
and the kind, yeah, like that, like I think Doyle's Watson in the stories. I
Is
mean,
Doyle.
he's also brilliant and he's so creative and he's so triumphant in pretty much all the things that he tries to do. Even if we look back on the spiritualist stuff and the fairy stuff and think like you're crazy, but he really was the top of his game. Even when over time, and maybe his opinions of the Boer War and the Empire don't hold up anymore, but at least in his life, he kind of really succeeded at everything except being a doctor.
Mhm.
And yet he writes a story where this doctor has these reactions to Sherlock, and it's not that it's not that Doyle would have been like Watson, like not
Mhm.
quite figuring things out. He would have been more like Sherlock because he studied under Dr. Bell,
Huh.
but there's a lot of Doyle in Watson, I
Mm.
think, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
I think
I
so.
mean Doyle basically is Watson, and Holmes is the character that he created to kind of be the we'll just say kind of be the best version of like himself. Basically, it's kind of for lack of a better term, like Doyle writes a Mary Sue, essentially. which
But
is
it's better, right? Because in the Mary Sue, always like the Mary Sue is always like trying to be the superlative character, and
yeah,
this works so much better because Doyle is the Watson insert, and he's not the Sherlock insert. And I
exactly.
feel
But
like
Lindsay Fee, I
overrated.
think, wrote a version of Doyle Writes a Mary Sue, and it's beautifully performed by Ashley Polisek, and I love Ashley because she does it with the very like exaggerated Scottish accent.
Explain to people, Monica, what you mean by a Mary
Oh,
Sue.
a Mary Sue.
There's people that
A
don't.
Mary Sue essentially is basically like when an author writes a very thinly veiled version of themselves and
What
inserts
makes her
themselves
perfect.
into the canon or into the
And it originates from a Star Trek fan fiction, in case anybody was wondering, where
there
there
was
is actually a character
less you
named
on
Mary Sue, and
it.
she like was perfect at everything and saved the Enterprise and captured Spock's heart
I
and
I
never
all
mean,
this
it
knew
was
stuff.
that.
like,
I never
yeah.
knew the
Well, now
origin of
you
that.
do. Now
And
you do. I
so
mean, Star Trek
basically
gave us
Doyle
like
writes a Mary
everything,
Sue.
so
But
Star Trek gave us Slash. Star Trek
I mean,
gave us
exactly. Well,
fans.
Star Trek fandom is, yeah, amazing. But no, I mean the male version is Gary Stu, but it's
Stop!
all.
I've never heard that.
Oh, you've never heard the Gary Stu? Oh my God, yeah, Doyle writes a Gary Stu, but that's why I had to say Mary Stu or Mary Sue because the Mary Sue is so much more well known.
I didn't know that. I see. I'm always learning things.
That's interesting because I always think in Dracula that Stoker is Mina and doesn't know it.
Oh, totally,
Mm.
totally.
Um, uh, but
All these men are throwing themselves at me. I can't help that I'm popular.
yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I'm so popular.
Why
Uh,
won't women
the
write me back?
no, that's Lucy.
Oh, that is Lucy. I'm so sorry.
Everyone loves Lucy. It's like,
Everyone loves Lucy. Yes.
that's the
Yes.
show. Everyone
Well,
loves Lucy. But with
That's
I
true.
love
Mina,
Lucy.
she's she does all the timetables and she organizes everything for everybody. And she's behind just as Doyle was in real life in his job at the Lyceum Theater and Sir Henry Irving. And he has
Yeah.
to keep kind of containing Mina, even though she should be the star, just as he was contained in his life and he couldn't be the star like Henry Irving.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's like all
girl.
kinds of parallels. But anyway,
Oh.
um, enough of Dracula. There's a whole 28 episode series you can watch, Sundays with Dracula, if you want to really get into that.
So fun.
That was the first biblio venture. I the pageant illustrations, and I made a point of sharing original like PDFs of the stories that they were originally published in the Strand and the double columns and all the pageant illustrations through them. For me, because I think that to read it the way the original readers did is a good experience to have. Now, not everybody people may have read them in their own editions and then looked at the illustrations, but Paget for me has such a strong impact on the original conception of Sherlock, and then ever since what we think of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, especially with the deerstalker hat, it's a cloth cap in the stories, and for Paget it becomes a deerstalker, which is maybe what Doyle meant anyway. But it really works. What do you opinions, or what do you guys think of people having editions or being aware of Paget illustrations as they encounter Sherlock?
I mean, it's interesting because it's like there's the Paget illustrations and there's also the Frederick Dorr Steele illustrations.
The Americans,
And
yeah.
so you basically have two major illustrators kind of I don't want to say like warring with each other, but depending on which one is your first introduction to Sherlock Holmes, it basically changes your conceptualization of the character. I was introduced to the Paget, and that's one of the reasons why like Clive Marrison is like a perfect visual representation of Sherlock Holmes. Jeremy Brett is pretty damn close.
Clive Marrison, who did the radio Sherlock.
Yeah, Clive Marrison, who did the radio. But if you look at the way that Clive Marrison is in like the publicity photos, I mean, he is spot bloody on. with the with the Paget illustrations. I mean, he's got the receding hairline,
Yeah.
he's tall, he's gaunt, it's perfect. And Jeremy Brett, is a very close second, and actually did quite a few publicity photos mimicking the Paget illustrations. I mean, so for me, it's kind of like seeing the Paget illustrations and then seeing them in depicted by Brett first and then Marison later. It's kind of like, ooh, this is like now my version of Sherlock Holmes.
And
This
yeah,
is I mean, the illustrations and the actors that mimicked the illustrations basically merged and became one and the same.
because for me, the Sherlock is unique in characters in that the iconography of
Mhm.
Sherlock Holmes is as important as the text in a
Yeah.
sense. Maybe it's not as important, but it is very important along with the text. And you find that that's not the case with 19th century works, or I mean, for a long time it was with Dickens, but then that kind of went away. But I find it so important, this iconography and being able to see Paget and Dorsteel. But
Mhm.
we'll have to wait for Sherlock Monthly to really delve into Dorsteel. We did them with Empty House, but we'll have plenty
Yes.
more.
I am so excited for Freddie. So yay, Freddie.
We share the Empty House manuscript, one of the great treasures of the Rosenbach's collections. There was Dr. Rosenbach had bought the Empty House manuscript, kept it in his personal collection. It was not, as far as I know, it was not offered for sale in catalogs. It was not in either the New York shop or the Philadelphia shop that people could see. He kept it at his house, that he really liked the idea of having it. And I think the poor old bibliophile in it, really, charmed him that was in that story. This may be a question especially for Mary, but Anastasia or Monica, please feel free to jump in. But I'll start with Mary. How important are manuscripts to us in understanding texts and there you go. That's my
Oh man, softball.
What a great
Softball
question for a
question
medievalist.
for the medievalist. Oh my God. Yeah, some of the most important things that we do in medieval literature, right, is going back to the manuscript. Print culture obviously changes that a bit, and I'm sure Anastasia can speak to that better than I can. But I mean, when you work with a manuscript, you are just keenly aware of the human behind it, of the very embodied nature of the text. I mean, when you're working with medieval text, it is literally embodied, right? You're working with parchment, which is animal skin. And so you can never quite get away in a medieval manuscript from the idea of writing on the body and as a body of work. But you see all kinds of things in manuscripts. You see things about how manuscript is used. You see if something is annotated or not. You see if it's multiple different hands or not. You see if it's worn. You see if it's in good shape. Is the spine cracked? Is it not? Like you find out so many things about how it was originally received by its audience by looking at the manuscript itself. And so being a medievalist in America, right, means being very dependent on modern technologies for high resolution scans. You can't pop over to England every time you want to look at can't go see the Beowulf manuscript. There's only one, but we've got these sort of high res scans that you can look at. But something is always lost in the digital image. There's something that is always, usually it's scale. It's usually very difficult to tell how big something is or small something is. I've been to the archives many a time where I've called something up and it shows up and it's like itty bitty. And I'm like, oh, I don't know why I thought I was getting something larger. I've had the opposite experience where I've gotten a ginormous, I was just at the New York Medical Society Library, and I thought I was getting a relatively small bound edition, and it was very big. So that gets lost when you're not dealing with the physical object. It's one of the things that is so great about the Rosenbach, and I was very lucky to work with your Canterbury Tales manuscript last year.
Anybody can come as the Rosenbach. You go on the Rosenbach's website, set up a research appointment. You do not have to be an accredited scholar or have a particular book deal that you can prove that you're to look at them. that
They let me in.
they
Damn
let
it.
even let
Darn it.
Monica
Yeah,
in.
they let me in.
You've all
Now,
looked at materials in the
I mean,
Rosenbach on
yeah,
research.
We all have.
but
Yeah.
the difference between Anna and Mary and me is that they have PhDs.
They do.
And I am a lowly
They
master.
are accredited scholars. They also want to
Exactly.
look at our
And I am a
film.
lowly master's level counselor. You
There you
know,
go.
I am not an academic,
And I am
but they
I'm
still let me
completely
in.
unaccredited. So
Well, yes. Well, we'll just say is that
I've got a BA. There you go. There you go.
I
The
got an
secret's out. So I've had people call me Dr. Pettit in my lab. I'm like, no.
yeah.
I
Oh,
did some
that
grad school stuff here and there, but then I started reviewing books for for the newspapers. That was like
yeah.
what I thought.
You decided you didn't like starving.
I
Yeah.
decided I wanted people to read what I wrote. So
Yeah, I mean that's a big difference.
Ouch.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's
there's
a
no
lot of
lie
people,
there.
you
Yeah.
write you can write an academic article, and
Oh yeah.
it's limited how many people are going to read that. But you
Four
write
people are going to
for a
read your article, and one
newspaper,
person is going to be pissed.
yeah, and
Well, always.
you write it for
There's
like
always
a
people who are
weekly
pissed
or
at
something like that,
anything that you
and you have
say.
thousands, tens of
Yeah.
thousands of readers. So
Oh yeah. No, I mean I'm a lowly master's level counselor. I can do my job without having a PhD or a
have you
degree.
all, and I because I know Monica and Mary has seen the Empty House manuscript. Have you seen it too? Have you?
I have not, but I will take your
There you
word
go.
for it that it
We need to fix
exists.
that,
Because
Anna.
I know you've researched other things at the Rosenbach.
Well, at my soonest convenience, I will cross the Atlantic once again to see this manuscript.
When you're next in Philadelphia for the Copper Beaches.
That is a good question. Not this. I know the
Not,
next meeting is in May,
not
so
in
not
May.
that one.
Yeah,
So-
and in late October, I'm the officiant for the wedding of my Sherlockian little brother.
We will
So
miss you then.
the last weekend of October. So I will probably
Well,
not even be in Philly for beaches.
I didn't want to end this show without mentioning the special guest we had on in the first half of the series. We had Les Klinger, the author of the annotated Sherlock, series,
Yes.
all the stories and novels, the new annotated Sherlock Holmes. Les was wonderful to have on for an episode. Ray Betzner came on for an episode. Was really wonderful. Scott Monty and Burt Walder from I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere podcast came on, and then Scott's going to return for Hound of the Baskervilles, and Steve Rothman was on for the Empty House because he is one of the editors of the BSI Press's facsimile edition of the Empty House
Out
manuscript.
of the abyss.
So it was great having special guests on, and we'll have more people on for the Hound of the Baskerville series as co-hosts for those shows. And then I'm kind of unlimited for the number of guests I can have for Sherlock Monthly.
Anyone could show up.
When we get to do that.
And they will.
And they will.
Exactly.
Well,
will.
it's time to say goodbye. We've done 2 hours tonight, and I know this drink isn't even going to be done anytime soon. So maybe I should extend this. But I was wondering if you guys have any last words, anything you wanted to express before I do my final, little Sherlock Mondays lines.
It's been a hell of an honor being on this program. And so, I mean, I never, as I said in the beginning, I never envisioned myself as a Sherlockian scholar. And so this is really fun for me. And, I want to thank you. I mean, and I think I thanked Steve Rothman last episode because I'm not sure if Steve recommended me or you thought of me, but whoever thought of me, thank you.
You were already on my list.
Oh, bless you, Ed. But
you were all on my list already.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's very heartwarming and touching.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's extraordinarily complimentary, to be considered for something like this. just because this is, as I said before, it's not exactly how I conceptualize myself. And so it's been really fun to be able to do a deep dive in the stories and, talk live about this and basically go on straight on a geekgasm, if you yes, nerdgasm or geekgasm is basically my one of my favorite phrases. But basically just kind of like love this stuff. Like without reservation, without we'll just say without being worried about how I'm being perceived. It's just good to be able to nerd out with friends. And so this has been a fantastic and lovely experience. So thank you so much, and thanks to our audience for tuning in.
I'm sorry Curtis
Yeah.
couldn't here because the whole nerd out would have so
Yeah.
applied to him. So
Of
obviously,
course.
the
Yeah.
original
Well,
nerd.
I will, echo Monica and say this has been an absolute pleasure. I remember being on the Frankenstein show way back when. It feels like, both an eternity and also like a completely different world that we
People
lived in
can go back and
then.
watch that. Sundays with Frankenstein. Anastasia is one of the co-hosts. It's an absolutely stellar, fun time
Yeah.
with Anastasia.
Yeah,
and the other
back
co-hosts
when
on
those
there.
were on Sundays, and I remember for the first few shows being, so nervous. But through these shows, this has become just a joy and something that I'm so comfortable doing. And I've gotten so used to just being able to speak to so many people and to have my opinions and my views and my sort of expertise appreciated and heard, and that has been so wonderful. So I have so appreciated that.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Anastasia. Let me
Of
thank
course.
you because she's done the other show with me. She has done courses at the Rosenbach, and boy, I love working with you. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you so much. Yeah, no, the Rosenbach really is it's a delight. It's one of my favorite places, like academic, or sort of scholarly institutions that I've ever worked with. And it's been so welcoming and was a mainstay of my time in Philly when I did my PhD there. So I still think so fondly of that building
We'll get you back
on
as much as
Delancey
we
Place.
can.
We will physically, yes. I hope to be back sometime soon because it's so lovely.
Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, how do I echo what's already been so eloquently put? Ed, thank you so much for having me on. I've been in wonderful company. I mean, I'm honored to have spoken with the hosts that you have here and also the special guests. These have all been people I've looked up to in the Sherlockian world for a long time. And it's an honor to be part of a Rosenbach program. The Rosenbach does so much for the city of Philadelphia, not just for scholars. And a program like this is wonderful because it's reminds us all that our libraries, our museums are for everybody. And this literature is for everybody. And Sherlock Holmes is for everybody. And so to be able to be part of a show that brings in new readership and gets people curious about reading, gets people curious about the Rosenbach. It's like, well, I watched the series, like maybe I'll go take a tour, maybe I'll go check it out. I encourage you to. It's wonderful. So thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this. And I can't wait to come look at that manuscript.
Yeah. And I hope we can do
Absolutely.
more. I hope we can do.
I know I said my piece, but I do have to echo what Mary said because I do think accessible sort of educational programs, accessible museums and libraries, that's so important. And I am so happy that these programs have been free, that they will remain free and accessible to people. Just hours and hours of content for anybody who wants to learn more about these classics that they might find daunting. I like to think that, we provide a kind of welcoming and low barrier to entryway to read these classics and to enjoy them. So it's been an honor to be a part of that.
Good. Thank you. All righty. Somebody did ask on Facebook, or on the live chat, and Monica answered about the Facebook group page will remain up, active. It's going to especially be active through Hound of the Baskervilles. I'm going to be posting on there through Hound of the Baskervilles, even if people, cannot, join us for that venture. for the paid venture. And then it'll continue afterwards. And then, of course, we'll have Sherlock Monthly. I'll probably change it, and then it'll be Sherlock Monthly instead of Sherlock Mondays. But that will always remain up, just as all the group pages on Facebook have remained up for all of our shows. So that will always be there. Well, it is time to say goodbye until our next biblioventure. I wanted to do a big thank you to our audience for coming on this journey. And to all of you who are discovering these videos in the future, like beyond the time that I'm saying this, I hope you will all be a part of our Sherlockian community too. If you're discovering this in the future, don't hesitate to leave questions, comments, or send an email to me at the Rosenbach, epettit@rosenbach.org. When we set out on our first biblioventure during the pandemic with Sundays with Dracula, I just needed to create online programs out of necessity. And what we wound up creating, though, was a special community of readers focused on a book, but linked to one another. You know, the biggest, most rewarding discovery was that we are not alone in our love for these books. So the collections at the Rosenbach, the first editions, the manuscripts, the artifacts from history that we have, they allow me to tell stories that connect people together, not just a person and a book, but a person to another person with the book as the connector. And that's one of the best things of my entire life. So thank you all for making this possible. I hope this biblioventure with Sherlock Holmes and John Watson has been rewarding to you. I hope you've made some reader friends here. I hope to see all of you on further biblioventures, or maybe even in person at the Rosenbach. Please support the Rosenbach, and more importantly, please support each other. Sherlockians, thank you for joining us on episode 30 of Sherlock Mondays, and thank you for watching this series. All the episodes will remain on our YouTube channel for you to watch in the future. Share them with your friends who are interested in reading Sherlock Holmes. Register for the Hound of the Baskerville show, starts in 2 weeks. Register for the fall biblioventures, Monsters and Ghosts. You will see us in the future at Sherlock Mondays, or Sherlock Monthly, starting in November. Monica, Mary, Anastasia, oh my God, thank you so much, guys. What a blast this has been. And Curtis, who's not here. Curtis, thank you so much.
Curtis, we love you.
It's been a pleasure. It's been wonderful to be here.
This has been cool. This has been really cool.
All right, everyone. Believe me to be, my very dear fellows, yours sincerely, Edward G. Pettit. Well, the game is a book. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. You've all been great. Thank you so much. I'll see you all soon.